Welcome to the School of the Lost Tribes. Psalm 45:6. Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a right scepter. Explanation. This verse emphasizes the eternal nature of God's kingdom, with his throne enduring forever. The scepter here represents righteous rule, a standard of justice and authority specific to God's kingdom. It serves as a prophetic image of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who embodies this divine authority over Israel. This scepter is not merely a sign of rulership. It is a direct assurance of God's righteous governance over his chosen people, Israel, through the line of David and the eventual restoration of the kingdom in Messiah. Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Explanation. This prophetic blessing given by Jacob to his son Judah reveals that the scepter, a sign of kingship and authority, will remain within Judah's lineage until Shiloh, interpreted as the one to whom it belongs or the rightful ruler, comes. Shiloh is commonly understood to be a messianic reference, alluding to Christ as the ultimate ruler who will restore and gather the scattered tribes of Israel. Here, the scepter emphasizes God's covenant faithfulness to maintain authority and kingship within Israel, focusing especially on the tribe of Judah as the chosen line through which ultimate leadership, in the person of the Messiah, will emerge for the reunification of Israel. Numbers 24:17 verse. I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheth. Explanation. This prophecy by Balaam envisions a future ruler, the star out of Jacob, and the scepter from Israel. This ruler, symbolized by the scepter, will bring judgment to Israel's enemies and deliver victory. The scepter represents not just a symbol of authority, but an active force of deliverance and judgment against those opposing God's people. It foretells the Messiah's coming, who will restore and protect Israel's sovereignty, fulfilling God's promises of redemption and establishing his justice. Psalm 67. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine. Ephraim also is the strength of mine head. Judah is my lawgiver. Explanation. In these verses, Judah is symbolized as the lawgiver, closely tied to the scepter and rulership over Israel. Judah's role as lawgiver further establishes the scepter as a continuous emblem of God's chosen governance through Judah's line, reaffirming his promises to maintain authority and leadership within the tribes of Israel, specifically through Judah. This assurance of leadership is pivotal to Israel's identity and divine mandate, underscoring God's covenant with his people that he will govern and guide them directly through his chosen lineage. Isaiah 30:31. For through the voice of the Lord shall the Assyrian be beaten down, which smote with a rod. Explanation. The imagery of the scepter or rod here connects with the Lord's decisive power to bring down Israel's oppressors. Although the Assyrians used their own rod or scepter of earthly power to oppress Israel, God's authority is shown to be supreme. His scepter surpasses all human authority, signifying that he alone holds ultimate power to judge and to save his people from foreign oppression. This verse reinforces God's protective sovereignty over Israel, demonstrating that any earthly power pales in comparison to his divine scepter, the true source of authority and deliverance for his chosen nation. Essay Scepter and Rod in Scripture and its use by God. The Bible is rich with symbolism, especially in its use of the terms scepter and rod, which hold significant meaning regarding God's authority, rule, and care for Israel. Both terms are frequently mentioned throughout the Old and New Testaments, often associated with kingship, judgment, and the establishment of divine order. By examining key passages, we can gain deeper insight into the theological importance of the scepter and rod as symbols of God's relationship with his chosen people, Israel, and his sovereign control over the world. The scepter, a symbol of sovereign authority. The scepter is typically an ornate staff held by a king, symbolizing ultimate authority, rule, and the right to govern. In Scripture, it represents not only royal power, but also a divinely sanctioned authority that originates from God himself. This symbol of leadership was not just an emblem of power, but a sign of righteous governance that God entrusted to specific leaders within Israel, particularly those in the line of Judah. One of the earliest references to the scepter is in Genesis 49:10, where Jacob blesses his sons and foretells the future of each tribe. Concerning Judah, he says, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be." Here, the scepter is a symbol of authority that God has specifically assigned to the tribe of Judah, indicating that leadership over Israel would remain in this lineage until the arrival of Shiloh, commonly understood as the Messiah. This passage establishes the scepter as a divinely appointed right of rulership, prophetically linking the Messiah to the line of Judah and emphasizing God's covenant with Israel. In Psalm 45:6, we find another reference to the scepter, affirming its connection to divine authority. "Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a right scepter." Here, the scepter represents not only power, but righteous governance, contrasting God's rule with that of earthly kings who may rule unjustly. This passage foreshadows the Messiah, who will wield this scepter in perfect righteousness, indicating that God's ultimate rule over Israel, and eventually all nations, is a just and eternal one. The scepter is thus shown to be an enduring symbol of God's unchanging authority. The rod, symbol of discipline, judgment, and guidance. The rod, closely related to the scepter, often signifies discipline and correction, as well as guidance and protection. Unlike the scepter, which is primarily a symbol of kingship, the rod embodies a more direct form of God's interaction with his people, both as a means of guidance and as a tool for judgment against Israel's enemies. In Psalm 23:4, David famously declares, "Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." Here, the rod serves as an emblem of God's protection and guidance, much like a shepherd's rod used to direct and protect the sheep. David's use of the term speaks to God's care and direction over his people, Israel, reassuring them that he will guide and protect them through life's challenges. The rod here is a comforting symbol, showing that God's authority is not only about ruling, but also about shepherding his people with attentiveness and compassion. The rod also symbolizes God's judgment. In Isaiah 10:5, Assyria is referred to as the rod of mine anger, a tool of divine retribution against Israel for their disobedience. The rod here is not a symbol of comfort, but one of correction, demonstrating how God uses other nations as instruments of his will to chastise his people when they stray from his commandments. Yet the rod also serves as a means to ultimately restore Israel, as the punishment aims to bring them back into alignment with God's covenant. Another powerful image is found in Psalm 2:9, a messianic prophecy that speaks of the Messiah ruling with an iron rod. "Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel." The rod here becomes a symbol of unwavering authority and power, underscoring the future role of the Messiah in subduing the nations and establishing justice. The rod of iron suggests that the Messiah's rule will be unbreakable and decisive, reinforcing the idea that God's ultimate plan for Israel and the world involves establishing a kingdom of justice and righteousness, one that will not tolerate rebellion against divine law. The dual role of the scepter and rod in God's plan for Israel. The scepter and rod together present a dual image of God's relationship with Israel, as a sovereign ruler and as a shepherd who disciplines and cares for his people. This dual role reveals the depth of God's love and commitment to Israel, as he is both their king and protector. The scepter's association with Judah and the promise of a messianic ruler from this tribe point to the continuity of God's promises to his people. By reserving the scepter for Judah, God shows his intention to honor his covenant with Israel, appointing leaders who would represent his authority and establish justice. This promise finds its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus, the Messiah, who inherits David's throne and rules with divine authority, ensuring that God's promises are upheld across generations. The rod, in contrast, often illustrates God's immediate actions in guiding, disciplining, and sometimes chastising Israel. This disciplinary role is not meant to destroy, but to correct and refine, leading the people back to covenantal faithfulness. Through the rod, God ensures that his people grow in righteousness, learning to rely on his guidance rather than their own understanding. Just as a shepherd uses a rod to direct the flock, so does God use the rod to direct Israel, showing them the right path and protecting them from their enemies. Conclusion: the eternal scepter and rod of God's kingdom. The imagery of the scepter and rod encapsulates the unique relationship between God and Israel. The scepter, as a symbol of kingship and divine authority, affirms God's sovereignty and his enduring promise to provide a righteous ruler for Israel. It speaks to the permanence of God's rule, which finds its culmination in the Messiah, who will unite and lead Israel with perfect justice. Meanwhile, the rod illustrates God's role as a shepherd, guiding and disciplining his people as necessary to ensure they remain aligned with his will. Together, these symbols reveal a God who is both a king and a shepherd, ruling with justice and guiding with care. The scepter assures Israel of God's promise of leadership, while the rod confirms his active involvement in their spiritual growth. Both symbols ultimately point to a future in which the Messiah, wielding the scepter and the rod, will restore Israel, judge the nations, and establish an everlasting kingdom in which God's righteous rule will be fully realized on earth. Through the scepter and rod, Scripture communicates the profound depth of God's authority, love, and covenantal commitment to his people, Israel.